Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a quick streak over in Apple Motion. It will be animated and then we can use that exported video with alpha. We can use that in MO2 in a 3D environment. Starting with the 1080 project, 30 frames per second, and this is going to be a quick streak, so I have the duration set to 3 seconds. And inside of Motion we can immediately work on our streak, and I'm going to use the B-spline tool, clicking off the scene, maybe coming somewhere way over here and then coming back over here somewhere. So this is going to be our stroke, and of course we can adjust this to maybe fill up the screen a little bit more, something like that. I'm going to press enter, and that's going to close that shape in, but with the B-spline selected, if we go over to the inspector underneath the shape tab, if we uncheck fill, we now have our stroke. I'm going to make that a little bit wider. And some other things you can do with this stroke, you can apply various shape styles to it. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to leave this as is. Let's work on animating this thing. We're going to use the first point offset and the last point offset to animate this on and off the screen. So since I want it to come from the bottom left corner and animate through like this, we're going to keyframe this last point offset. At the very beginning of my project, I don't want to see it, so I'm keyframing it. Now I'm not going to go all the way to the end. So I'm going to click somewhere roughly around here, frame 73 of how many ever it is, roughly 90, yeah. So somewhere, anywhere in here is fine. I'm going to drag this on up so that we have that front part coming and then it leaves the screen. Now what we want to do, as that is animating, as you can see here, I want the end of this tail to also start animating off, and maybe we'll start it somewhere around here, but I'll tell you what I'm going to go ahead and do. I'm going to drag my playhead to the end, and I'm going to go ahead and set this first point offset so that we can see it is leaving the scene. I'm going to keyframe that, come somewhere roughly around here, doesn't really matter, and I'm going to drag this first point offset back to 0. So what we now have is a streak animating on, and then you can see the end is following it off. Now we can fine tune this. Maybe I don't want this end piece to animate on so soon, so we can take that keyframe we have here and just drag it on over to where it animates in a little bit later. So let's give this a look. So now we have a longer streak. Looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and share, export movie, and we want to use one of these Apple ProRes so that when we go to render, we can render the alpha piece to this. And basically all we're going to have when we render this and use it in MO2, we will actually see just the streak once we apply a few settings. I'm going to set my render quality to best, click next, and inside of my MO2 shared folder, this will be in tutorial number 12, streaks. And I'm going to call it streak sample. Let that render out, and here's that streak. So now let's import this into MO2. So maybe I'll make this a little bit longer, 5 seconds. So in this new blank project, let's go ahead and load up MO2. And underneath File, let's go ahead and import that video. There's that streak sample. Now if we give this a play, we can see that it is showing, but this is not what we want. But I do at least want you to see that we do have this alpha going on. We don't have a black background where this video is. All we see is the white streak. I'm going to select MO2, head over to the inspector, and let's just go ahead and add a 3-dimensional shape. A sphere will be just fine. Let's also add a plane. And what we want to do with this streak sample, we actually don't want to see it the way it is right now. So I'm just going to hide that so we don't see it. And with the plane selected, let's apply a new material. For this new material, underneath the albedo, I'm going to go to drop zone. I'm going to drag that streak sample into the whale for the drop zone. And if we click play, we're going to see the streak, but now we have that black background coming back. Quick fix for that. I'm just going to drag back so we can see the streak somewhere in here. Let's scroll on down to the opacity, and let's select alpha cutout, and let's use albedo alpha. And just like that, the black is gone and all we see is the streak. We can illuminate this streak, change color, and now what we want to do is we want to adjust this plane that this drop zone is on so that we kind of wrap around the sphere. Now depending on what size that video file was of that streak, you have to adjust the position, scales, and all that stuff a little bit different because maybe you decided to create a square video versus a 1920 by 1080, or maybe even a 4K streak. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go to my default camera, reset this, and I'm going to drag out on my Z. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's easier for me to move things corresponding to X, Y, and the Z axis. So we don't see the streak anymore on the plane. And if we rotate this on the X axis, we can see our streaks back. We can widen the plane, or instead of doing that, maybe we want to just adjust the entire scale in general. That's going to make our streak really big. So maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to scale just the X. That's going to make it wider. So there's tons of options here. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to create a null real quick. I'm going to take this material and I'm going to move it to the null. Now let's remember that if we do drag this back and we move it, let's just bear in mind that it's wrapping around this way. And as I animate this, you can see that happening. And basically what I want to do here is I want to move this material off so that I can get a good idea of what this plane looks like. And now I can resize it based on seeing the plane itself, and then we'll apply that material back to it. So I am going to go ahead and take the scale and bump it on up to say 4. And I'll only use that null to have somewhere to drag that material into, but I tell you what, I'm going to put that camera inside of the null, and then we can use this null to rotate the camera. I've mentioned this many times in my tutorials. And at any point in time, we can drag this material back onto the plane. We can see the streak. Let's take our null, and for the rotation, let's rotate it this way. So now we're a little bit, rotated around. We have our streak. I'm going to go to my plane and I'm going to take this streak here. I'm going to drag it back on the Z and maybe up some on the Y. And let's give that a whirl. So we have that animating. Now you can move it closer, and something I probably would do here is I would take my camera and move it in a little bit closer. That way the streak will come off the screen. You see how we can see it animating? It's starting to come on here. And what I want to do here is I want this thing starting off the screen so we don't see it. And a couple of ways that we can achieve that is either we can move the plane, or we can take this null and maybe rotate it on the Y some more. That looks like it's going to be off the screen. Maybe let's go up on our X some, or down. And feel free to rotate on the X as well. Now with all these rotations, we may mess up where the streak actually goes around the sphere, but actually that looks pretty good. But the effect I wanted there is that the streak is coming from off the screen, and then it's going to come and kind of like get close to the camera and then go off the screen. Now some effects we can do to really make this pop a little bit more. Let's go to our camera. Let's set this on old maybe. Give it that dusty look. Go to bloom. Let's bump the brightness up. And then obviously it would be a good idea to come in here and change the material of the sphere. Something else we can do to add a different effect to it is to add another plane. Make it really big. So I'm just going to take the scale and bump it on up. Let's slide the Y position on down. Something like that. Let's apply material to this plane. New material. And all I want to do to this is take the metalness all the way up, take the roughness all the way down, and for this plane that we now have as a floor, I'm going to select the plane, come down to planar reflections, and I'm going to enable. So now we have the sphere and the green streak showing. Now it looks like we're going to have to make this floor a little bit bigger because we can see the edge of the floor there, I think. No, that's actually pretty good the way it is. Perfect. Now if this is too grainy, then you can go in there and adjust the camera settings. But yeah, there you have it, a way that you can quickly create a streak in Apple Motion and then use it in a 3D environment in MO2. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.